Very much. Well, there is a new push to legalize and regulate marijuana in Canada, and it comes from a surprising source. 4 former mayors of Vancouver. They all sent a letter to members of municipal, provincial, and federal governments in BC saying ending the prohibition on pot would stamp out gang violence, bring in tax dollars, and build safer communities. Catherine Pope has more.
What do Philip Owen, Sam Sullivan, Mike Harcourt, and Larry Campbell have in common? Aside from being former mayors of Vancouver, they have all come out in favor of legalizing marijuana.
Legalize it and tax the daylights out of it. Well, Pierre Claude...
It's like cigarettes then.
Just exactly like cigarettes, like tobacco and alcohol that kills 65,000 Canadians, just the same thing. And you get a tremendous amount of revenue out of it, and you'll take the criminal element out.
The mayors have written an open letter to BC MPs, MLAs, mayors, and councillors. They say marijuana prohibition is a failed policy which has fueled gang-related crime. A Fraser Institute report estimated that BC's illegal cannabis trade may be worth up to $7 billion annually.
The answer is regulate it, suppress it through government policy, tax it, charge people for it, stop making it a loss through all the prisons, police, and everything else, and start turning it into a revenue generator.
They say they want to at least get people talking about it. Do you think marijuana should be legalized?
Sure, why not? Sure.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it should be controlled. It should be heavily controlled. However, it takes away so many instances, such as people wanting to commit a crime.
But the province's Attorney General says it's not on the radar.
It's an interesting discussion, but it's not a high priority for us at this point in time.
Well, why didn't you ever pursue this when you were mayor?
Maybe because I wanted to get reelected.
So he knows selling the idea will be tough, especially with the federal politicians who would ultimately be the ones to change the law.
Well, one of the men driving the Stop the Violence Coalition joins us now. Dr. Evan Wood is a lead researcher at the BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS and the founder of the International Centre for Science in Drug Policy. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
So I wanted to ask you first, is that true, what Sam Sullivan referred to? Are politicians the problem?
Well, if you look at the polling data, they are, because there's just an extreme lack of trust among the electorate in BC in politicians to do something about this. About 70% of British Columbians want to see marijuana taxed and regulated, and the politicians are currently, 0% of politicians are promoting that. So there's a huge discordance there.
You are a medical doctor. You know what harm marijuana can cause. Why are you advocating for legalizing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're talking about a strictly regulated market under a public health framework. As it stands now, and I should say, no one is advocating cannabis use. Cannabis is unsafe, and that's all the more reason to regulate it. By turning it over to a violent, unregulated market, that explains why young people have easier access to cannabis than alcohol and tobacco. So because of these health-related harms...
If you want to regulate it, though, won't there still be a black market for it?
Well, we don't for alcohol. We have a tiny black market, if you want to call it that, for tobacco. We tax these things to the point at which there's a threat of an illegal market emerging, and then that's where we sit. We maximize revenue. We drive down rates of use through that tax revenue. So because I'm in public health, and the Canadian Public Health Association, the Health Officers Council of British Columbia all agree this should be a regulated legal market that starves revenue to organized crime and, quite frankly, protects young people and everyone else much better than the current model that we have.
How hard would it be to lasso everybody who's growing pot right now? I mean,
illegally.
Illegally, because you think, okay, so we legalize it, and then so-and-so marijuana company shows up and they start selling it like cigarettes or alcohol. But there might be some guy who thinks, you know what, I don't want to do that. I'll just keep selling it out my back door to all my friends and make my money that way.
And not be taxed and stuff.
So let me respond to that in 2 ways. First of all, what we're trying to do is do that. And let's say by some miracle, let's say with the new mandatory minimum sentences that we put in, we can take 10% of the marijuana market away. that would have the perverse effect of making it that much more profitable for more people to grow marijuana. So certainly you cannot control this illegal market. It's just those laws of supply and demand. In terms of a legally regulated market and someone else coming along and growing marijuana, well, we don't see people making cigarettes. We don't see them making alcohol to a large degree. People could be free to do that, but we could have education campaigns around that.
People can start growing pot plants in their house, for example. That would be pretty common. Isn't it? It's easy to grow, isn't it?
Presumably, but that's the type of thing that would land you in front of a judge. Your tax dollars would be paying for the lawyers, the judges, locking people up. We're having an omnibus crime bill that proposes a mandatory minimum sentences for 5 marijuana plants. You know, that's your tax dollars at work. If someone under a new regime that was regulated and generated tax revenue chose to grow one plant, I mean, the libertarian in me wants to say, if they're not hurting anyone else, I'd rather see the police chasing rapists and murderers and actually enforcing laws that can protect community health and safety rather than laws which have created a boon for organized crime and actually worsened community health and safety.
You're preaching the converted, because I think it should be legalized, but, and I don't even smoke it, but let me just play devil's advocate, 2 things here. One, there's a lot of people out there who say, okay, you legalize marijuana, now you've moved the fences out, so which drug next has to be legalized in a few years? Is it coke or what is it? And 2, gangs were profiting in the States during Prohibition from bootlegging alcohol. When alcohol was legal, they found other things to make money at, and they didn't go away.
Okay, so let me address the second point first. This notion of drift, organized crime drift, to believe that implies that we're somehow making ourselves more safe through cannabis prohibition, like somehow we're protecting ourselves from these organized crime groups doing something else. If we take this cash cow away from them, they'll moderate their behavior like all humans do. They'll be forced to go to something that is less profitable and less easy to evade police. So that's exactly what we want them to do. Alcohol prohibition in the States ended. A huge, violent, illegal market went away. A huge opportunity to raise tax revenue emerged. Now, I'll say one thing about alcohol prohibition. In this province, we don't do a great job in terms of employing the regulatory tools that could be used to reduce health-related harm. Alcohol is not a safe drug. Liver disease, heart disease, high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke. I mean, the list goes on. It's very addictive. It's much more dangerous than cannabis. Violence associated with alcohol use, the drinking and driving and everything else. But we've allowed alcohol outlet density to expand. We've extended operating hours. So this is the conversation around the public health tools that could be employed for cannabis to actually reduce people's rates of use. Right now, organized crime's motive is profit. It's impossible to try and prevent people using it.
And the gateway drug idea?
It's been scientifically proven to be totally false. Alcohol and tobacco are the strongest things that predict subsequent going on to other drugs. This idea about marijuana is just absurd.
Dr. Wood, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for your interest.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Very interesting.
We'll be right back. Thank you.
Thanks.